feel for what you know so that I know how much time to spend or not spend in certain areas. Our topic today, as Allison mentioned, is B2B marketing. And again, some of you have no experience, some of you have a little experience in that area. I'd like this to be interactive, so if you have any questions during the time, please feel free to go ahead and ask them. Like I said, I could talk forever, but I'm not going to do that because you guys have other stuff to do. So my background, right now I am this was working, head of marketing communications for what is a startup called Advanced Robotics for Manufacturing. We started in January of 2017, and we're a different kind of startup. We actually spun out of Carnegie Mellon University. Carnegie Mellon University was awarded a contract to start a national robotics institute focused on accelerating the use of robotics in manufacturing. And that's our mission. And so we are in, we get our funding from the Department of Defense. We got $80 million over a 7-year period to spend. And primarily what we do is we fund projects to achieve that mission, to accelerate the use of robotics in manufacturing. If you guys have any background, especially if you grew up in Pittsburgh, you knew that at one point manufacturing was king in the United States. It's not king anymore. Other countries have taken over the lead in manufacturing. The Department of Defense thinks it's a national security issue that we're not manufacturing more things here in the United States. And so we're working with them to accelerate the use of the growth of robotics here. So that's what I do. So I started as a second employee there in spring of 2017. I've been working to launch that company. I've also worked at 2 startups as a chief operating officer, one with my husband previous to Touchdown. And I've worked multiple roles as a CMO or a VP of marketing. I myself have launched over 50 technology products and have worked on over 100 different products, working with as a consultant and also in different businesses, helping them grow. I work with entrepreneurs and students like yourself here at Pitt. I work with all the accelerator programs that we have in Pittsburgh, mentoring and coaching different teams. I was involved with over 20 acquisitions, so I know a lot about that too. And personally, I always focus a lot on women in technology, so I helped launch a WILD chapter, which is Women for Economic and Leadership Development here in Pittsburgh a couple years ago, and was recently featured, I think I'm the oldest person featured in Women in Technology Pittsburgh. I've been at this for 40 years. I am not, because I have about 800 events this week that I'm going to, unfortunately. Yes, I know, I need to get there. So this is my life. I've been doing this forever, so if that helps, that's what we're doing. So since some of you don't have any background in marketing, I always like to kind of step back and talk about what marketing is, because marketing is a very nebulous area. It's not very strictly defined. If you're in engineering, there's some more strictly defined constructs that are there. If you're in accounting or finance, again, there's laws, there's all types of things. But marketing is a very gray area. Does anybody know why? Because you're dealing with human beings, right? And human beings are not predictable. Right? And so marketing is all about, with your psychology background, marketing is all about trying to influence people who you can't control, right? And that's what makes it very gray. So certainly there are parameters in marketing that make sense, but ultimately marketing is something that is, you can't go by the book every single time and think that you'll get the same results every single time. Because people are people, and people have different emotions and different things happen in their lives that cause them to believe more or less in what it is that you're selling. The other thing about marketing that I want to put forth to all of you is that it's a strategic activity. Many people think of marketing as tactical. They think of a website, or they think of going to a trade show, or they think of a Facebook page. Those are the implementation of your marketing strategy. Where most companies fail is that they don't look at marketing as a strategic activity. They don't think about the buyer enough, and they run right to the tools, which we'll touch on a little bit, and think that that's going to help them be successful. But my favorite definition of marketing ties to some of this, some of these words that are up here, which I've been using for a long time, but in the upper left-hand corner. The purpose of a business is to create and keep a customer. That's what marketing's responsibility is, to create and keep a customer. So marketing is intrinsic to the success of any of your businesses, whether you're working for somebody or whether you want to start your own. And very often in young companies, they don't understand the importance of marketing very early on. And so that's, if I leave you with anything today, I hope you leave you with the fact that it's a strategic activity. It's something that's very important to think about at the very beginning of anything that you're working on, if you're thinking of being an entrepreneur or working for a company. And again, marketing is, you could take marketing classes, could keep doing it, but the truth is I learn every single day. I'm still learning about marketing, and I've been doing this for a long time, because marketing changes. When I learned marketing and what happened today are 100% different, right? I didn't have the internet. That's how old I am, right? When marketing started. There was no concept of digital marketing when I started marketing. And so the dramatic changes in marketing are substantial, and they continue to change. And so marketing is a lifelong learning discipline. And if you get into marketing, you have to think about it that way. Or maybe if you get into accounting, there's a set of rules that you follow, and those rules pretty much stay the same, unless, of course, something changes and some law is passed. Marketing changes constantly. So you guys got a good sense of sort of thinking about it from a strategic standpoint? The other thing is many people confuse marketing and sales, and they are fundamentally different jobs. And a lot of times in young companies, they'll have somebody doing both of those jobs. And that turns into a problem. Does anybody know why? Well, if you think about what I just said, marketing is a strategic activity. Sales is a more tactical activity. I need to close this deal this week, this month, this quarter, right? Where marketing, the investments that you make last for years. And so what happens when somebody is asked to do both marketing and sales, what's human nature? Human nature is to focus on the thing that's right in front of you that's to do next. So often marketing gets the short shrift when someone is asked to focus in both marketing and sales activities. And that's why it's important to sort of think about the fact that marketing is more long-term and strategic. And of course, there's tactical elements associated with it. Sales is more short-term and tactical, and of course, there are strategic elements associated with it too. But they are fundamentally different types of jobs and different types of roles. And somebody who's a good marketer may not be a great salesperson, and vice versa, and you shouldn't assume that they are. Okay, so what are the primary responsibilities for marketing? I kind of look at it in three key areas. The first is image and reputation. When somebody hears a company name, what do they think of, right? When I say Apple, right, or Microsoft, or Toyota, or GM, instantly some image comes to mind, right? It may be a positive image, it may be a negative image. You may think that that is a good company, you may think it's not a good company, right? But that's the brand and the reputation of that company. And it's marketing's responsibility to develop that and work hard to ensure that it's as positive as possible, sometimes even when you find yourself in a situation where there's some negativity associated with your brand. So that's one of the key responsibilities of marketing, is to manage, to create and manage that image and that reputation. The next key area of marketing is what I call lead generation and nurturing. And we're not going to get into all these, but I just want you to think about them. And that goes back to the purpose of a business, finding customers, right? So anybody who wants to start a business, that's the first thing that they need to do, is find out if somebody else wants what they have to sell. Those are your prospects. And then when they buy, they turn into your customers. So a key responsibility for marketing is this lead generation, creating a pool of potential buyers for your product. And then nurturing means providing them with information so that they can make an informed buying decision and pick your product or service, right? So that's what lead nurturing and lead generation and nurturing is. And the third is customer engagement. We don't want people to just buy once from us and go away, right? And so we want to continue to engage with those customers so that they feel good about the purchase that they made from us, and they want to continue to do business with us. That's a responsibility of marketing as well. So as I said before, the purpose of a business is to attract and retain a customer. Lead nurturing is about attracting a customer, and customer engagement is about retaining that customer. So very broadly, those are the responsibilities for marketing, and they are broad. That's a lot of different activities that a marketer does. And for anybody who goes into marketing, you might find yourself gravitating towards one of these areas as an area of expertise. I have a daughter who works for Nike out in Oregon, and she is a director level person, and her primary responsibility there is to grow the brand of Nike with direct relationships. Right now, most of us buy our Nike clothing at a third party, like Dick's or something like that, right? When that happens, Nike doesn't know anything about you. They don't know if you've bought, if your whole wardrobe is Nike or you have one Nike item and a bunch of Puma stuff, right? They have no idea. So what she's trying to do is help them create more of a direct relationship between the buyer and the brand, Nike, so that they know that you bought five items of Nike clothing and not one, right? And that you're a Nike fan. And so that's a very important responsibility for marketing. That's a very narrow job. She has nothing to do with the website. She has nothing to do with public relations. She has really nothing to do with lead generation or nurturing. Her whole focus is on image and reputation. So even though she's at a big company and she's got a great job, she's got a very narrow job. And you'll find that with marketing. And one of the tricks about if you go into a young company is all of those things need to be done at some level. And finding the people who have those right expertise is sometimes tricky. And so I always say marketing is one of the hardest jobs in a company because it's so broad and because there are so many different ways that you can specialize to add value in an organization. And if you're looking at hiring people with marketing, you've really got to think about these key areas and what's important to you at that time for your organization. Does that make sense? Okay. So next I'm going to talk a little bit about target market, because not everybody is your customer, right? And the thing that's most important when you're thinking about customers is thinking about these types of questions that are over here. So your target market with B2B, that's business to business marketing, is that group of businesses that are most likely to buy your product or your service and have the money to do so. Okay, so you want to think about it that way. And they share similar characteristics. You know, I have children that are your age. There are things that appeal to me that don't appeal to my children and vice versa. We are not in the same buying group for many things. There are a few things that we might be in the same buying group for, but there are many things that we're not. And so that's important to think about because not everybody wants your product, and knowing who wants and needs it and can pay for it the most is critical. And the other key thing is that people buy based on both rational and emotional factors. You didn't need that third pair of Nikes, but it was really cool. The latest one that came out had gold trim on it, and you thought that was really cool, so you bought it. That was an emotional buy. You could rationalize it saying, my other ones aren't looking that good, but the truth is, they were fine. You just wanted that pair with the gold ones on it, and so that's an emotional buy. Every purchase has rational and emotional elements associated with it, and it's a spectrum. Some things are very rational. I just moved to Pittsburgh. I need a place to live, right? That's rational. Where I live and how I have so much money to spend, that's rational. Where I live, what neighborhood I like, that's emotional, right? Your third pair of Nikes this year, that's emotional, right? So you've got to think about it in that spectrum. And businesses do that too. And that's why I wanted to bring that out. So it's not just that pair of Nikes with gold on it. It's, am I buying a product or service that makes me look better in my job, right? Or makes me more productive so that I don't have to work every night and every weekend, right? Those are the things that are the emotional pieces to the rational buying in B2B. That make sense to everyone? Okay. So, there's 4 secrets to buying, and these are important to remember. One is people buy to fulfill a need or desire or to solve a problem. Ultimately, everything you buy, whether it's this bottle of water, right, or a laptop or a car, is either a need or a desire or you have a problem, right? So if what you're selling doesn't fulfill a need or desire or solve a problem, you're probably not going to sell it. So you need to figure out what that is, right? Because that's what has to be communicated. Because that's how we all buy every day, right? You stop into the corner store to buy lunch because you're hungry, right? So every day we buy that way. And so it's, again, important that what you're selling addresses this first one. The second one is people buy from friends or friends of friends, that element of trust. Your product has to establish some credibility in order for somebody to want to buy from you, right? And a lot of times that credibility is established is by the customers that you have already. So if I'm talking to Allison and I tell her that I went to see this movie last night and it was really great, and Allison and I are good friends, she's going to trust my opinion because I know Allison and I know what she likes or she doesn't like. So if I say, Allison, you should go see that movie, she'll probably go see it because we're friends and she trusts me. However, if I'm a movie critic or if I'm running an advertisement that says you should go see this movie, Allison may not trust that as much, right? Because it's like, oh, yeah, well, they're just advertising that movie. That's the company who produced the movie. I don't have as much trust in that particular one, but I have trust in Suzy because she knows me, right? And so that element of trust is really important in buying. The third one is people buy what other people who are like them buy, right? Again, there are certain brands or certain things that you buy that I don't buy and vice versa because we're in these buying groups. And the fourth thing is there has to be a benefit and it has to be answered by the question, what's in it for me, right? What do I get out of this? Every buy is personal. Even if you're selling to the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company, there's a personal element that's associated with it. That person is going to say, that CEO is going to say, what's in it for me if I make this decision to invest in your product or service? And that's the question. And the answer is not a list of features. It's a benefit. What am I going to do? Is that going to make that CEO's company more competitive? Is it going to allow him to be more profitable? Is it going to allow him to show that he's more innovative than anybody else in a certain area, right? Those are the things that buyers are looking for. Not that, you know, you have these features or functionality and you have 8 colors, but somebody else only has 4 colors. That's not ultimately why people buy. People buy because they want to answer the question, what's in it for me? Does that make sense, everybody? So next, the hardest thing to do in marketing, and we're still doing Marketing 101, we'll get to B2B in a minute. The next thing is being able to describe what your business is. And this is called a positioning statement. Sometimes people call it the elevator speech. You're stuck on an elevator with somebody and you got 3 minutes to describe what it is you do, right? And this is really important because this lays the foundation for everything that you communicate about in marketing, because it's the set of statements that describe what your business is, why people care about it, and answering the question, what's in it for me? And what happens is when companies don't do a good job establishing their positioning statement, then they waste a lot of money marketing because they're not effectively communicating the key messages about their product or service to the audience that cares about them the most, the target audience. Last thing I want to touch on is a brand. And we talked about this for a minute or two before. It's what comes to mind when somebody hears or reads your company name or product. It is not your logo. Your logo is not your brand. Your logo may invoke a feeling, and that's your brand. It's what you think of, right? It's a shortcut and a promise kept, right? And so you think of all the brands that you use and that you trust or you've lost trust in every day, and that's the promise kept. If the promise kept, I see a few of you with Macs here. If you believe that Macs are the best laptops in the world, that's a promise that you want Apple to keep making to you. If they falter, if they come out with some crappy software, or they have some problems with it, then they're breaking the promise that they made to you about the quality of their laptop, right? So when you think of Apple as a brand, you expect a level of quality that they have to be very careful to maintain, because that's the reason why you're willing to pay a premium price for their product. A brand is relevant and different, and the power of a brand lies in its ability to influence purchasing behavior. So again, using the example of Apple, I think most of us have a very positive perception of the company, right, and its products. And so we're willing to buy something We see people, I don't see it as much now, but like when, 10 years ago, people used to line up like 2 days before the new iPhone came out and wait for it in line, right? That's crazy, but people did that, right? And so that is huge brand power. That's huge influence on purchasing behavior when you're willing to sit on a sidewalk for 2 days to wait for a new device that you know you're going to replace in a year or two anyways, right? So, what's key is that a brand is a living entity. So it's enriched or undermined cumulatively over time, the product of 1,000 small gestures. I really like this saying. This is from Disney. So if any of you went to Disney when you were kids, or maybe you still go today, you know that to them, brand is so important. Every person that works at Disney is highly trained to interact with the visitors in the park a certain way. And that's expected when you go to the park. That's their brand, right? That's what you expect when you go there, is to be treated a certain way. So brands are really critical in marketing. This concept of a shortcut is probably one of the single most important. And what I mean is, I'm not going to get a lot into sales, but you guys heard of a concept of a sales cycle? Sales cycle is the length of time it takes from the time I talk to you about something to you decide you want to buy it, right? That's a sales cycle. Having a strong brand shortens that sales cycle because they've already heard of you, right? So you don't have to spend time telling them who you are and what you do. What do you think the benefit, though, is of a brand with a shorter sales cycle? More sales, right? Because the person who's selling can sell more because they can spend less time on each sale because you already know. When you walk into the Apple store, you've already made a decision that you're going to buy an Apple product, right? You just walked right in the store, right? So nobody there has to convince you to buy an Apple product. You've already made that decision. You've self-selected, as opposed to maybe going into a Best Buy where they may have, laptop brands from a bunch of different companies. Then you've got somebody there trying to help you figure out which one to buy. Not taking the time, not counting the time it takes to actually get somebody at Apple to wait on you. The buying cycle is very short because you already know what you want. You probably know which model you want, and you just walk in and you stand in line and you're going to buy it. If you go into a Best Buy, you may not know that, right? So that buying cycle is longer. So the value of the brand is, if you invest in marketing and you build a brand, your salespeople should be able to sell more faster because that shortcut exists. So what is B2B and what's B2C? Let's talk a little bit about that. B2B means business to business. That means one business selling to another business, another organization. B2C is business to consumer, and that means a business selling to one single person, a consumer, right? So a simple example, if I sell chewing gum, right? When you walk into the 7-Eleven or the store and you buy a pack of chewing gum, you're a consumer, you bought that. However, I manufacture it and I sold it to the store. That's the B2B part of it, right? I sold the gum to the store sold it to you. So the store has the B2C relationship because they sold you that pack of gum, and I have the B2B relationship because I sold that to the store. Does that make sense? Now, they're different. Typically, a B2B sale is a larger dollar sale. Not always. If I'm a real estate person and I've sold you a $500,000 home, that's a big sale, right? Or an expensive car. But for the most part, consumer buying is not big. You're buying sodas or packs of gum or, retail things or, e-commerce items, some clothing on the internet, things of that nature. And you're usually the person who's making that buying decision. When you're in a B2B environment, there's generally, especially if it's a big sale, there's generally more than one person involved with that buying decision. And depending upon the complexity of the sale and how much that product costs, there could be a big group of people involved with that decision to purchase your product or service. B2B sales typically take longer to close. You walk in, you buy that pack of gum, you're gone, right? But it may take me longer to convince that store to carry that gum if it's a new kind of gum, right? Because they may not have the shelf space, or they, are getting pusher from their other gum vendors to not take my product. And so it takes longer for me usually to get somebody to buy my product in a B2B sale. There are often some type of contracts involved. Again, there's no contract when you buy a pack of gum, but there's probably some type of contract or agreement that's associated with me selling that gum to that store. Okay, so that's what adds to the complexity of the sale, and that's what also adds to the length of the sale, is there's usually some type of legal document that's involved with that. Customer support may be different, right? If you buy a bad pack of gum, you go back to the store and say, this gum wasn't fresh or whatever, they deal with it right there. If I shipped, a case of bad gum to somebody, I've got a different issue that I need to deal with. I need to go back and deal with the manufacturer and deal with a lot of different issues. And the brand engagement is often different too. And so you might pick this new pack of gum because you read about it on social media, but the store that I'm selling to, they don't learn about gum on Facebook. They don't go on Facebook. That doesn't make sense to them to do that, right? And so the way that you engage with the brand is very different. Make sense? Anybody have any questions? You guys are so quiet. Okay. So there was a survey that I pulled some data out of. It was run in June of 2018 from a company called Demandbase. And so they do a report every year, and they survey buyers in the B2B space, and they want to just get a sense for what's happening with buying. So there's some key changes that are here, and I think that they will make sense to you. There's a desire to self-navigate the decision-making journey. What that means is that B2B buyers now are more likely to do their own research, right, on the internet, because it's easy and it's free and it's easily available, right, before they decide to engage with you. And so you have a challenge as a marketer, because there could be all kinds of good and or bad or old information about your product or service that's out there. So if companies are doing this self-navigation and figuring things out themselves, then you as a marketer have the challenge to make sure that the information on the internet is consistent with the way your brand you want your brand to be presented, so that when these people are doing research, they see the things that you want them to see, right? That's a big job and a big challenge for marketers today. So you see less and less of an opportunity where you walk into a situation and somebody says, I know nothing about you, tell me about you, right? That's very rare in B2B marketing, and any sales, right? The addition of formal buying groups or committees to review purchases. I talked about this before, that it's often a committee, but what's happening is that because of social media and because the ability exists more than anything else to expose when people make good or bad decisions, people are more thoughtful about the buying decisions that they make today, because they don't want to be exposed for making bad ones. A demand for more relevant contextual content and outreach from sales. What that means is that buyers are looking for third-party information, contextual information, information that could validate their buying decision, but not coming from the salesperson or the supplier directly. Because again, that's not authentic, right? That's not, that is persuasive to get you to want to buy something. And a strong preference for anonymity. Do you guys do that today? Like, how many of you go somewhere and when they ask you immediately for your email address, you just get out because you're just not ready to commit, right, to maybe an e-commerce site. You're looking to buy something and they ask for your email address right away. We don't like that. We don't want to expose ourselves until we're closer to the buying process. Yes? This is B2B specific, right? I mean, some of them certainly are applicable to consumer, but these are B2B specific results. Yes, go to this. I know that Allison put this presentation up. Yeah, so you can look through there, and there might be a similar survey that these guys did. I know Demandbase is really focused on B2B marketing, though. But a lot of this is still relevant to B2C. Not the committees as much, but a lot of the other stuff. Okay. Well, you can pull from this, right? At least there's more data about this in here. And a greater need to engage with sales later on in the journey. So what our buying processes today is we're going to do some research, we're going to figure out what we want to do, we are going to ask the company for specific information at specific times when we need it because we want to control the sales cycle. We don't want the supplier to control the sales cycle. And when we're ready to engage with the supplier to learn more about the product or move things forward in the sales cycle, we'll then ask for them to really start to pay attention to us. Now that's very different from 10 years ago when the salesperson would go in and set the stage for the sale and lead the buyer through the whole process. Right now, the buyer's going through the sales process themselves, a piece of it, and then engaging with sales later on in the sales cycle. And so again, the importance of marketing to make sure what's out there, right, on the cloud, in the world about your company or your product or service is really important because somebody may decide not to even talk to you based on some information that they find out there. Yes?
So at what point does sales actually come in? At what point does the marketing part of it begin to fade out and does someone take up the sales role in a small company?
As soon as a prospect is identified, so as soon as say that you guys over here on the right have been identified as people who are likely to buy, that's when sales come in. So marketing generally doesn't contact an individual buyer. What marketing does, like I said, it's kind of, I use a war analogy. Marketing's like the air war. So, they're dropping the leaflets down from the sky, from the airplanes. And the salespeople are the ones that are doing one-to-one engagement, right? So when you're at a point where you've identified when marketing's identified a group of people, they said, hey, here's a list. You go after these guys. That's when sales takes over. But what marketing needs to do is support their efforts so that sales isn't surprised. So sales doesn't go talk to somebody and somebody says, gee, I've been reading all about you on the internet. You got a really bad reputation. Whoa, right? Marketing's not backing sales up really well there. That's something that marketing needs to focus on to support sales, and they need to work with product development or leadership or whoever to deal with that particular issue. Does that make sense? Okay, you have a question? Right.
So if it's in B2B context, what would some of the stages be that the buyer won't actually implement?
They don't return your call, right? So you've contacted them, you've contacted a potential buyer. Give me that list of potential buyers. As a marketing person, I've already done some outreach. I may have sent them some emails, added them to a mailing list if they agreed to do that, invited them to visit our booth at a webinar, at a seminar, invited them to a webinar, and you don't hear anything back from them, right? So, and that's very frustrating for a salesperson, and it could be one of two reasons. One, they're just not interested, or two, they're going off doing their own research. And when they decide that you're somebody that they want to talk to, then they're going to contact you. Does that make sense? Yeah, so basically, and we do this all every day now because we all have easy access to the internet, right? So we are all anonymous researchers, right? And, marketing people and digital marketing spends a lot of time trying to figure out if you're spying on us, right? So you can get Google Analytics and things like that to see if you've visited my website 8 times, right? I can automatically send you some information because you visited my website 8 times. So I can tell when you're looking around. But you get these ads all of a sudden delivered to you on Facebook or Instagram that have to do with the type of product that I have. I know you're looking at me, right? But you haven't reached out specifically and said, I want to engage with you. Does that make sense? Yes.
So you mentioned multiple times the importance of the internet and the power of the internet and business owners to do their research.
Right.
So as a startup, you're really involved in that area. Mostly with limited budget. So when you look about getting third parties to do articles and so forth, what tactical things can we put in place to achieve this goal?
You are such a good straight person. I've got slides coming up and a couple things to answer your question for you. Great question, and we're going to touch on that in a minute or two. We're going to get there. So I just wanted you, again, because marketing is so much strategy, I want you to think about these things if you're looking at buying behavior. So these were the 7 takeaways from the survey, and I think that we touched on most of them when we talked before about some of these things. But I think, again, some of the key points is one thing they found is that the purchase cycle has increased, so it's taking longer for people to make decisions. And I do think it's because there's more information available to them, right? And they're including more people involved with the purchase process. Again, because I think the internet provides more information. Forms of social proof, that's the credibility statements are important. And obviously when people buy solutions, they think about how long it takes to implement them and how easy they are to use, right? Ease of use is one of the most underrated, but the single most important thing you can do with any product or service. Because we're humans, and if something's hard to do, we don't like doing it, unless it's like climbing a mountain or something. But we don't want that from the things that we buy, right? And so ease of use is critical. How long it takes to use it is critical. Buyers, they want buyers, again, back to authenticity, they want buyers that understand their problems, that they have some knowledge or experience in the type of, in their market and what they're doing. And they want content that's targeted towards them, that makes sense to them. They don't want to see generic ads. They want to see things that speak to them directly. So those are some of the key things that came out of the survey, which I live this. That makes sense. So what's really important in B2B marketing is knowing who the decision maker is. And sometimes that's really hard. And because there are multiple people that are involved with this. So if you're selling, let's say, a software solution into a large organization, right? The decision maker may not be the user of that product, right? Because say it's a software solution for the finance department. The decision maker may be IT, right? They're doing the evaluation, but the end user may be the finance department. So you have to make sure that both IT and the finance department are satisfied with your solution. Then there are influencers. Maybe there are people at the organization that use the competitor's finance solution prior to coming to and so they have good or bad opinions. And then you have the saboteurs, and you've got to watch for those. Usually when you're in a sale to a group, there's one person there that doesn't think that your solution is the best one, right? A lot of times it happens. And so you've got to figure out a strategy to deal with that. And so there's a lot more complexity in B2B sales because you have these multiple types of people that are involved. The people making the decision, the people using it, the people who are influencing it either positively or negatively. And you've got to take all of them into account, typically, when you're doing a B2B sale. So, back to your question, there are everyday new ways to reach an audience. Digital marketing continues to give you more and more ways to reach people. And this just even touches on, what some of those are. And so frequently I'm asked, what should I use? Just that question, I'm a small company, I have no money, what should I use, right? And the answer is pick the thing that your audience uses. Right? So if your audience is on Facebook, pick Facebook. If your audience goes to trade shows, go to trade shows. So my point is, everything that we saw on this slide here is good or bad for your business. Because it doesn't matter what it is. This is just a tool. What's important is, how does your prospect, your target customer, learn about the types of products or services that you're selling? And it could still be a print newspaper. It actually could, right? If that's how they learn, that's what you do. So what I see a lot of companies do is they'll pick something because they're comfortable with it. They'll pick social media because they're comfortable with it. But if your audience is never on social media, then you've wasted a lot of time, right? And so that's the golden rule. And the most important thing when you're starting a company or you're in an early stage company and you're talking to prospects is ask this question. How do you learn about products and services like mine? Where do you go to learn? Oh, I do research on the internet. Oh, there's a trade show that I attend twice a year. Oh, you know what? I follow this blog, right? This guy has a lot of knowledge and I follow this guy's blog. Oh, you know what? I spend about 3 hours a day on LinkedIn, right? Those are the kind of answers that you want to look for. Those are how you decide what to invest in, okay? The great thing about marketing today is it's not that expensive compared to how it was 20 years ago. The bad thing about it is there's so many things to do that you can do, right? And it gets overwhelming for a young company about making choices about what they should do. Does that make sense to everybody? Y'all wrote down that rule, right? That question. That question is critical, right? Market and sell the way your customer likes to buy. Thinking about also when you're investing in marketing is what are your goals? And you should prioritize them. And they go back to the things that I talked about at the very beginning. Are you in customer acquisition mode? Do you need more leads? Do you need prospects, leads, potential buyers, and customers? Do you need to engage more frequently with customers because you have more to sell them? Or you want to keep them as customers because maybe you have a subscription service, right? And you want to keep them. Or do you need to create some brand awareness because your competitors have very strong brand awareness and you're finding it's very hard to compete because of that? You're always doing all three of these things, but at some point in your organization's life cycle, one of these is more important than the other. And so what you want to do is you want to invest your marketing resources on appropriately, right? On the first, second, and third most important thing. Does that make sense, everyone? Okay. So I'm always asked, but what are your favorites, right? And you guys hate the answer, I know, but the one that works best still for B2B marketing is email. Anybody know why? Yes. Yes, that's true. There's two things about email that are really key that almost everything else doesn't have. Number one, it gets delivered to somebody. They don't have to go and do something. Like if you have a website, they have to go to your website, right? But email comes to them. Now again, I'm talking about permission marketing, meaning that, you know, they've allowed you to email them. So that's number one, is it comes to them. So that's easy, right? They have an inbox. It shows up. They don't have to do anything. What's the second thing? It stays, right? They have to do something to get rid of it. Social media is awesome. It scrolls away, right? You don't always see things on social media because it's not persistent. Every time you go to Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, you don't see the same thing. It's not persistent, right? And so the reason why email is still a good marketing tool is for those two reasons. It's delivered and it's persistent. And most people take actions to do one of these other things based upon an email. How many of you buy stuff on the internet? How many of you click on the email when they say there's a 20% discount? Right? So what happened? It caused you to do something, right? How many of you go visit that website every day looking for a 20% discount? Less likely, right? So that's why email is really important for B2B marketing. Remember, I'm talking B2B, right? Because when you go into the business world, you're either going to end up with Microsoft Outlook or Google products or maybe something else, but most likely one of those two, and you're going to get an inbox, right? I don't know of any businesses that don't have that. Maybe you do, but I don't know of any, right? And so that's what makes email so important for B2B marketing. Now, I can, and I've done this, I can do classes on email marketing. There's a skill that's involved with it. There's a lot with timing and content and everything else. But the fact is, it works to drive, it's the number one thing that still drives sales is email, okay? Second is your website. Why? Because what I said, because people are going to go out and do research. And what's the first thing they're going to do? They're going to see if you have a website, right? So they're going to see if you have a website. They're going to see if your website answers a few questions for them that helps them understand what the value is of your product or service, and then they make a decision to engage with you as a result of that. Very often, people go to websites through emails, right? Visit our website to learn more, right? You see that in almost every email that you get. The third thing is what I call curated content, or content that's focused or specialized for that target audience. And you can deliver that in blogs, you can deliver that in newsletters, whatever way makes sense for your audience. But again, people are looking, they don't want the advertising stuff anymore. They want the content informative types of things. So the more that you can do to position your company as an expert in certain areas, right? My job is to position my company as an expert in robotics and manufacturing at a national level, right? And we create content all the time in that area, then I'm establishing my brand as a result of that. And so content, in whatever way you deliver it, establishes your brand, establishes credibility, because remember we talked about how important credibility is to buying. Video and or in-person events. Businesses like to meet other businesses. You're not going to necessarily meet me as the manufacturer, as a pack of gum that you buy, but as a retailer, you might want to meet me as a supplier, right? So any opportunity that you have for in-person events or sharing and getting to know people face-to-face in B2B is critical. People buy when they have established a personal relationship, right? They're more likely to buy from you. And that's why salespeople will not go away completely, because humans still want to be able to have that type of a relationship. Now, there's some things that I buy where I've never seen the people that are there, right? But you may have products that require a lot of human engagement, and you need to understand at what level human engagement is needed. But generally, you put yourself in a better position, especially if you're selling something that costs thousands, tens, or hundreds of thousands of dollars, if you can meet that person, right? Or at least do some type of a video engagement with them. Next, I have social. Again, this is B2B. A lot of B2B sites don't do anything with social. If they do you know where they go? What's number one? LinkedIn, yeah. Number two is Twitter, right? Facebook is a far third. And it depends. If you're a retailer, you're in retail, Facebook may be really good for you. I don't have a Facebook page. There's no reason for me to have a Facebook page for robotics and manufacturing. I have a LinkedIn page and Twitter, right? There's no reason for me to have anything else. So pick the social media platforms that make sense for your audience that we talked about before. Mobile, I mean, it's really important. The most important thing I could say is that anything that you do with your website or your email or with your content, just make sure it looks good on a phone. Right? Because most people, I think now, I haven't looked for a couple years, but the last time I looked, I think 60% of all website searches were done on a phone, right? That's probably higher now. And what that means is that you need to have a website and emails that are, it's called responsive. That means that they resize themselves automatically based upon the display. So make sure, most tools that you use today will do that, but just make sure that whatever you're creating looks good on your phone, looks good on a tablet, right? Because if it doesn't, then people won't look. And since so many people are using mobile today, to make those decisions is important. Now, mobile is low for B2B. It's much higher for B2C because people do engage through, getting coupons through Yelp or things like that. They make buying decisions walking down the street on their phone of what restaurant they're going to eat at, right? Not so much in B2B. So that's why that's low. And as well as local is lower too for those same reasons. You may be selling nationally, right? So local focus may not make sense. Those make sense. Any questions about that list? Yes.
I'm wondering maybe this further. Something that people talk about a lot in B2B that I have no familiarity with based on the other marketing I've done is how to be at a trade show, especially if you can't afford to be an official vendor at a trade show.
Yeah, I have a lot of experience doing that. I don't have a slide on that, but the easiest way to do that is to establish yourself as credible, and then get yourself on, I do this all the time, engage directly with the show providers, the people who are running the show, and offer to give a presentation, okay? Very often, last year we did 99 events. So I know how to do trade shows, unfortunately, or fortunately. The majority of these events that we did were invites for us to come speak. We do very few booths, right? You get just as much credibility being a speaker at a conference as you have as a booth. And sometimes if you build your own brand strongly enough, they'll give you the booth for free, right? So I would say if you're trying to establish yourself as an expert, say, in senior living, have a blog and newsletter, start to establish some credibility that way, and then find out what all the different what the different conferences and trade shows are. And senior living has the best conferences by far because they're all in really nice places. Like in manufacturing, I get to go to like Detroit and Indianapolis in the wintertime, and my husband's going to like Napa Valley and, and exactly, yeah. So Hershey, we get chocolate. But that's the least expensive way is to get yourself on the speaker route. Sure, yes. Yes. Yes, I'm just saying sometimes you send out like we send out a monthly newsletter, right? We also have a blog, but we send out a monthly newsletter, and that's sort of the best tool for us, we found, to communicate with our audience. We've been building, we've got about 3,000 email addresses that we've built over the past 2 years. And that adds organically every month, right? We get new ones. And so it really is your audience. The nice thing about a newsletter, again, is it's an email, right? So it ends up in the inbox and it sits there. If you have a blog, you can send an email that say, I made a new blog post, right? And essentially our newsletter is just a collection of blog posts, right? But it's formatted to look a certain way, right? But if you have a blog, then you still need to let somebody know that you've updated something on your blog and they should go read it. And so that's always a little bit more challenging. So I think newsletters don't work for every business, but for the ones that they work with, they are highly effective. Because if nothing else, I get exposure to this group of audience, right? 3,000 people once a month, right? And I have a very low unsubscribe rate, which means that at least they like getting them. I don't know if they're reading them. I can count the click-through on some of the articles, but they do like getting them because my unsubscribes are pretty low. But they signed themselves up, right? I didn't buy a list. Don't ever buy lists. You can get a lot of trouble doing that. Sure.
I know
Yes.
versus international, but
Right.
local
Local.
marketing or local events or.
Well, there's things like Google Local, right, where you can, and then there are also other tools out there. There are like Yext and others that are out there that help you do local marketing. So that is if your customers are in a smaller geographic area. So they're just different tools that you can use to reach them than you might use if your audience is national or international. That's what I meant by that. Yes.
You mentioned the email addresses that you have, and I was going to ask you about that. How did you go about collecting them?
Mostly at trade shows. So when we go to a trade show, we ask somebody if they'd like to receive our newsletter. On our homepage of our website, we have a little box where people can sign up to get our newsletter. Those are probably the primary ways. People, when they inquire to us, because we run it's a member-based consortium. So if someone is interested in being a member, they either will sign up on our website, or they may call us, right? And if they do that, we ask them if we can add them to our email list. So that's how we did that. We were in kind of a unique spot because there were 230 organizations that were part of the proposal to the DoD to pick CMU to form this organization. So we already had 230 organizations that had already engaged with us that we were already communicating with. So we started our database with basically 230 organizations, and we've built it since then. The reason why you don't want to buy lists, and we're a little off topic, is because, number one, they're generally out of date because people change jobs a lot, right? They're usually 6 months to a year out of date. And secondly, any email tool that you use will specifically say, did you buy a list? And if you bought a list, you're not allowed to use my email tool. okay, because of spam. I mean, there are actually companies that have lost their ability to send emails because of spamming, right? And so they have these, you can get what's called blacklisted that will prevent you from sending emails. I used to run an email marketing company. So just don't buy lists. Use those organic means that I talked about to acquire people. And then when they see your email, they'll remember that they either signed up on your website or they met you at an event or something like that. Any other questions about this? Oops. Yep.
Just one last question. Do you, in your experience, have you seen any, going back to the whole self-navigation, buyer wants to be in charge? I've seen different companies, B2B companies, do value-based pricing based on what they discovered during the conversation, during the sales conversation. And then there are companies like SaaS companies that have straight marketing, you can buy now online. Is there any sort of advice you can give us in regards to is there a difference in your experience? Has there been a big difference in having buyers be able to buy now versus engaging with the sales? Right? I know price is a point, but sometimes you feel like you're leaving money on the table if you put it out there versus doing the value-based marketing. And then other experts will say, well, people who want to buy, they want to buy now. You're missing out on opportunities if you got to wait for a salesperson to follow up, or email us for more information. So I didn't know if you had any feedback in one way versus the other, or.
There are factors to consider. So certainly one is price, right? I mean, you have seen some price elasticity. People buy cars online, right? So people are willing to spend tens of thousands of dollars to buy something online. But certainly one is price. The second is how easy is it for somebody to make a decision without ever talking to a salesperson, right? And so if you have a product that requires some level of consultation, right, some level of engagement to talk with somebody about, the more consultative your product or service is, the harder it is to buy it online. So you would measure that, right? Is it the same exact product that everybody's buying all the time? That's very easy to just sell online, and it's very obvious what it does. But if it's consultative, means there's different combinations of somebody could buy based on their environment, that makes it harder to sell online. Not impossible, but it makes it harder because that becomes more of a consultative sell. The third thing that you have to think about is there more than one person involved with that decision, right? So if it's one person, it's easier to sell online. If it's a committee sale, it's much harder to do that, right? Because then how do you engage with those different audiences that we talked about before to make sure that they, based on their responsibility, whether they're the decision maker, whether they're the end user, whether they're the influencer, that they get the right information to put your product in the best light, right? So if you have a committee sell, it's much harder to do that online because you've got different messaging for those different types of buyers that are in that committee. The fourth one is how long will the sell take? Is it a committee sell? I have friends who are in the education industry. There's only a couple months a year that they can talk to those people because that's when the budgets are being set for the rest of the school year, right? That's a hard thing to do online, right? You want to get in front of those people who are making decisions at the right time in that sales cycle, right? And so that would definitely be something that you would want to engage with more in person. So it's the combination of all those factors which helps you decide what is the best sales process for your product or service. Does that make sense? Okay. Anybody else have any other questions? We're at our 1:30 point, but I'm happy to take a few more questions if anybody has them. Has this been helpful?
Yes.
Yes, question.
Actually, I prefer asking you, once you're done, I prefer asking one.
Sure, no problem. Okay. Okay, thank you for your time.